over to you,
Okay.
Ashley, for your case study.
Okay, so I've already mentioned previously to everyone that I've been working on a product intensive, and one of the pieces of output for this, in addition to a wealth of knowledge, is the experience of having basically tried to ideate, validate, and put out a product. In this case, I didn't get that far, but I still came away with a lot of learnings, and I basically wanted to share that with you guys. I already told you a bit about my problem before, and a lot of you expressed interest in finding out how it would, turn out in the end. So just for people who weren't familiar with the problem before, my problem statement, I basically open up with this. It's a dating product. So if you didn't know before, now you know. The problem statement for this particular product is that we believe that busy, career-focused people are currently frustrated by the drawn-out and often fruitless online dating process, and that their ideal situation is to be able to find their dates online and make meaningful connections in person as quickly as possible. I kind of already went through the context of, a problem statement and how it fits in, but just to recap what's really important here and basically identifying what product makes sense, what idea makes sense, is really to start with a product or problem that exists. And it's hard to know exactly what that problem is, which is why you go through the process of validation afterwards. This, in all essence, was essentially a hypothesis, which I think everybody can relate to here, and it's testable. How? This is what I want to talk about. So at its core, the idea is that fruitless online dating loops are a real and acute problem for these busy, career-focused people. And the way that I set out to test this was through a combination of user interviews and a quantification of the outcome of those interviews. It's not as impossible as it sounds. So basically what I did was I went through these calls. I wrote down the things that they mentioned. So I talked to 5 different women at first because this was my focus. I'll talk a bit more about that later. And basically listed everything out, the stuff that got mentioned. And I started to put ones next to the names that mentioned those things. And this is where the quantification comes in, because what ended up being revealed in this conversation with these women is that many of them were making the same arguments over and over again. This is the process of validating my hypothesis with what you would imagine to be qualitative information made quantitative here. And the most repeated problems ended up actually being pretty on the nose for validating my hypothesis. So they nearly all mentioned too much back and forth, not wanting to bother with setting up the profile, very alienating presentation. A lot of the women felt like the apps were kind of set up for men, finding women, for example, and also the inability to really figure out if everybody is aligned before they go on the date. So expectation management. So this is really well validated. I set out to do something called a blue ocean canvas. Okay, I didn't set out to do that just yet. The outcome of my original hypothesis was essentially the points that I mentioned. So here, this is the clear validation of the initial problem statement with a few key pain points that were repeated most. And this is basically them in order of what I believe to be most pressing. And this is actually how I oriented myself for, yes, the Blue Ocean Strategy Canvas. Keeping this in mind, keeping in mind the problems they were dealing with, I needed to take a look at the market and basically how the market was already addressing these problems. I chose 2 of the big 3 which is Tinder and OkCupid. And I also included Matchmaker because I think a lot of times when people set out to design things like apps or whatever, they really think about things that are definitely directly parallel. And one of the things I learned here is that your competitor isn't always who you think it is. And in this case, if you're looking for a process in dating that is quick, that is customized, that kind of gets the job done, and you have the money, like you have a job so you have the money, you might actually be going to a matchmaker. It might not be an app. So I included matchmaking just to kind of touch on, what might my weaknesses be compared to a matchmaker. And this is essentially what I came up with. I won't dive into all of the points, but I think like I basically mainly aimed for the things that the sites do very obviously well. So Tinder is known for its large selection, for example. A matchmaker is going to be known for maybe low digital accessibility. They're probably not going to have an app, but a really well supported pipeline. They're going to really carry you through conversions, for example. And this is kind of what I did for everybody here, and I tried to think about how I could really perform against these things. I don't think that there will be any apps anytime counter Tinder selection, for example. So I rate my very low chance I'll end up with a pool like that. Thought that at the end I would be able to really like dive interpreting the pre-policies, the expectations, for example, to make it safer, and quick version. I wanted to create essentially a plot that would facilitate quick conversion. Again, how? This is actually not the focus of this part of the process, and I'll talk a bit about more about that lately. Not getting super obsessed with your solution, um, but this is really how I thought I would set myself apart, and this is how I basically approached the Blue Ocean Strategy Canvas. However, what I realized is that I was looking at a platform. And so at some point in the program, I had tested my solution presentation with a mentor, and she pointed out that I was looking at an offer that exists within an offer. And this was true. And I didn't think that I could actually make it happen at the end. What I was running into is something that could be referred to as sort of feature factory situation. I was immediately thinking of all the things that I would need to pile on this thing to address all of those problems. But what it came out that conversation with the mentor was that there actually is something at the core that kind of tackles a lot of this: the lack of quick conversion, the on and on conversations, getting into the date, whatever. Um, and it was really just getting that person into the date so that they could figure out if they matched quickly, low effort, and basically spend less time on the bad match. This was something that everybody echoed, not just 4 out of 5 or most of them. Everybody. This just conversion situation. So I decided instead to focus on a solution that would tackle specifically getting the date offline. So I wanted to pivot, but due to time constraints, I wanted to be able to utilize as much of the information as I already had. So before approaching the next part, I realized that a scheduling solution didn't have to be women focused, for example, that it could maybe service men, but in order to prove that, I also did sit down and then have conversations with men to talk about their dating experiences as well, actually the same ones that I had with women. And at the end of the day, I didn't necessarily have to start from scratch. And again, this took a period of 2.5 weeks. This is not a month. This is not a quarter. This is really just weeks. I sat down and put in the effort and did that. And I was able to get input that led me to be able to come up with a pretty sleek concept for the new version of my product. And essentially this problem sort of expanded to busy online daters, period. So not just women, and their struggle with the messaging loop and conversion for the match or compelling date. Now, this thing here probably looks very complicated and very confusing, but actually it is a really great tool for simplifying the process of kind of defining what you want to offer to your customer at the end. So what you can see here is that it's broken down into sections. Um, I establish my problem first. This is very important. Establish your problem, and that's a validated problem. I talk to people to prove that that's a problem. I did the existing alternatives, similar to what I went through with the Blue Ocean Canvas. I also thought about other alternatives to literally scheduling dates. This wasn't just dating apps. This could be Yelp helping you figure to go, recommendations from a friend, blog posts from strangers, literally scheduling services like Google integrations and stuff. These things exist and they could do the job better than the app, but I don't know. So my solution at the end would try to tackle this by making it an integrated solution that goes on top of the apps people are using. What's really important to kind of make sure that this is a full setup, right? A comprehensive product is that other things have to be established, metrics for deciding if this is, doing its job, a unique value proposition. At the end of the day, you really do have to set yourself apart from competitors to make that money, to gain that usage, which is something we already know. And I work to define that. My unfair advantage, for example, what do I have? What is this situation equipped with that maybe sets me ahead in a way that goes beyond the unique value proposition. In this case, I thought about my own personal years of conversion focused industry experience, literally working in the dating industry focused on conversions. The conversions equaled money. This is a very key experience. And channels, as far as how you get the word out about the product. The customer segments, the early adopters, for example, who might be using this from the very beginning, but who does this inevitably aim for? And basic ideas about cost structure and revenue streams to like further strengthen this idea and make sure that it's a comprehensive analysis of what you expect to bring this to the forefront. Again, this did not take me half a year. I have to stress this mostly because it seems like a lot of work. Um, and it is, it's work, right? But it doesn't take that long when you sit down and you really throw your energy into it. That means not splitting the streams on pre-deciding all of your solutions and features, really sitting down and doing this. So my idea after I set up my basic product was really that I needed to essentially make sure that this was something that would service that problem. I had to basically prove that I could attract my niche with my minimum viable offer. And I've talked to you guys already about MVOs and MVPs, and I will do it again here because a lot of people weren't part of that particular conversation. But we work a lot with the MVP as a dev first company. We think a lot about what do we need to get out there that can do what we want it to do as quickly as possible so we can make the money. And this often leaves us in a development cycle that features way too many moving parts. We end up putting things out that maybe don't get the job done or don't solve the problem, mostly because we made a lot of guesses here. We get really wrapped up in how do we make a viable product, the whole fucking thing. But at the end of the day, and what I learned in this process was that maybe what might be better for us and for myself in thinking about this as product owner is to focus instead on something called a minimum viable offer. What is the specific solution for the specific problem that we're setting out to solve? I believed that my product would help busy people get their online dates offline in IRL with an insight driven date conversion guide and scheduler. This, at the end of the day, would be my solution. And to prove this, my second hypothesis in the process, I set out to build a landing page and a survey, get survey completion, and also validate the MBO as a foundation for the rest of the product, the vision and the strategy moving forward. So I did that. I set up my survey. I sent it out to more than just women. I sent it out to men. So again, I had to open this up at this point. I sent it to a lot of people. I put it in groups with thousands of members. I had a lot of interest. So if you look at the stats for the type form, there were a lot of people who started and didn't finish. At the end of the day, I got 25 responses, which is a pretty solid number. And I augmented this with more phone calls, like more in-depth phone calls to ask the same question, just to make sure that there was enough information here to validate this. And after I did those conversations, I tried to keep people on the hook by sort of asking them if they'd be interested in, learning more about the product. I combined this then with a landing page that I created using something called Bubble, which made the process very simple. I didn't pay for this. I didn't code this. I put words into a template and I showed this to people and they were really interested. And I connected the early access link you see there to MailChimp. And in the end, I actually was able to get people to sign up. I got 21 emails on the landing page using this, which was really cool, actually. I actually feel kind of bad that I'm not going to put this out, but I was able to get a lot of interest doing this. I think that this could have only increased if I had been able to create a proof of concept and really show people what that would have looked like. Because I think at the end of the day, this is what they wanted. A lot of people asked me, how are you going to do it? And to be able to show them would have been really cool. But this just didn't pan out for a variety of reasons. But at the end, I was able to start a lot of conversations. I was able to get really strong validation for something like this, a solution that's quite close to what people would have dreamed up of solving this problem. And that was a really validating experience. There's so much learning inside of that. And this is essentially what I wanted to bring to the rest of you guys. So um, this is really the beginning, middle, and end of my product in the context of Prod MBA. But that's not the end of what I've, done there and what I want to do moving forward. So for me now, it's very important to take that experience and put it into my work here at Bays. And this is oriented around 3 key learnings, which is defining our problem spaces by allowing ourselves to be informed by our end users. So why I use the word allowing? Because I feel like many times we want to skip that part because we think that we have to get things out so quickly that there's no way we can spend time talking to the people who are going to use this app or this product, and we just have to build it based on what we know about them. This actually takes the problem totally far out of the development process because you're not even talking to the person who's going to use it about that problem. You're just making a series of guesses that will service this. So defining our problem spaces by allowing ourselves to be informed by our end users, giving ourselves that time and that energy to do that. The second, moving our project focus away from the MVP and toward the MBA, away from that gigantic, monolithic, here are all the lean things we can put into this thing to make money. Again, not informed by end users, but our own personal idea of what we think they might want without any validation. And 3, showcase and stress test our solutions earlier in the process to confirm that they're actually doing what we want them to do. So many times we develop products without doing this. I can name a few very specific situations where we built something without doing any of this, and it cost us half a year. It cost us a year and a half because we left this, and those projects failed. Those teams dissolved. Some people quit because this affected them so deeply. And you wouldn't think that something as simple as just shifting around the way that you make your Asana board by validating it leading to consequences like this, but it does, because a poorly organized product leaves people in a bad mood, unmotivated, not sure what to do next. And so thinking about these things in many ways also empowers us to be able to do this whole thing of building a bedding product more intelligently and still quickly. So the first thing that I mentioned, identifying and believing in our end users. Right now, we basically just talk about who might be the one that uses this. We don't actually always confirm that. We just talk about who might use it. We talk about the problems that we've heard that they have. We develop what we think might service those problems, and then we just ship it off. And sometimes it's tested by them first before we put it on production. Usually it's not. What does it look like when you actually identify and then believe in them? So this includes the confirmation of the end user. This also includes first creating a hypothesis about the problem that our user is facing. So we already do this, but the difference is that we develop on that hypothesis without actually validating it. So in this case, we'll create that hypothesis as a separate situation, right? We establish this, then it becomes the center. We discuss this problem with the end user, we validate it through things like discovery conversations, right? You don't have to call strangers in this case. We know who our users are, but still talking to them about it in this context. And then analyzing those pain points for overlap to define the MBO. Like I showed you, quantifying these qualitative points and basically forming the core of the problem space, and then planning a solution based on that, based on the MBO, prototyping it and testing the prototype with the end users. This is all happening, and this is very key, before development. Before development. In this way, we also want to center our problem space. What does that look like for us now? Since we don't really do this, it was very hard for me to explain, but basically it seems that our pain points are identified by anyone. So this is not just talking to the end user, maybe the product person, maybe the CEO. The pain point is immediately contextualized in a larger system. How does it fit into what we already have? How is this going to look in the future? Immediately, macro. The development team decides what they need to add to the system to fix the problem, and then the features are just added on top as needed. New problem, new feature, blah, 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 blah. What it should look like in the end is that this problem is identified via analysis, like I talked about before, talking to the end user, right? Planning a solution that aims to solve the most pressing problems. Again, where is that overlap? What is our MBO? What can our MBO be based on these problems, right? Orient development and prioritize the discussions. So prioritization, right? Key around the MBO and not the macro. Because at the end of the day, if we're thinking about the MBO all the time, if we're thinking about the problem, remembering the problem all the time, we can always know what needs to be done. We can always know what is the most important part of the process because we know what we need to be fixing. Then there's really less time spent thinking about what might make sense to hop into next, what might we get the most value from next. Because if you know that thing at the core, if you know that MBO, then you know what you need to be tackling. And all of the tasks that come next should be the thing tackling that. This is how you can still work quickly while making sure that you keep this stuff in mind. MBO. Like I said, what does this look like now with the MVP? After we figure out what we want to build, which again is already done in an uninformed way, we make a guess at whatever the leanest version of that is. We develop that lean version and then we throw it out. What it should look like in the end is that we use this new process again to identify our end user's biggest problem. We figure out the solution that would solve this problem specifically, and then we dodge the feature factory commonly associated with the MVP obsession and develop around the MBO instead. This sounds redundant, but it absolutely is not when taken into context, because it's really very important to make sure that this is the core of the development and not the MVP. And at the end of it all, we want to fail quickly. So of course, just because you talk to end users doesn't mean you're going to come up with the perfect thing every time, right? While we do our MVP focus and we ship it out to our end user, we deploy, we get feedback sometimes, and then it goes into the backlog, right? Because we've already made the product. There's not so much you can do right now because we've already moved on to the next thing. What we will do then instead, right? Something we've already started doing in the betting team is we will do this process of end user identification, MBO, validation, blah, 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 and we will prototype on this. Sounds like a lot of work, sounds like a lot of time the devs don't have, and it's great because the devs don't have to do this. I can do something like that. The next product person can do something like that. There are so many tools that facilitate this. The ability to prototype a solution, stress test it with end users, and prove whether or not it makes sense by way of receiving that feedback before we spend the money on the dev time and the dev effort. This is the key to what everybody loves to talk about here, which is failing quickly. You don't want to fail quickly after spending all that money. It would be great to fail quickly after coming out with a nice quick prototype, seeing if it works, and if it doesn't work, going back to the drawing board right then. And like I said, this can still be done quickly and it can be done intelligently at the same time. The tools that I use in this program Miro, Bubble, Typeform, those are just a few of a wide range of tools that can be used to come up with ideas quickly, test those ideas with users, get information with users without spending all the time that you think needs to go into that. And I think at the end of the day, this is something we're good at. We're good at picking up new things, following the innovation, and putting that stuff to use. And I think at this point, we're primed to basically take advantage of this in the context of our end users. Absolutely something that we should do. So at this point, I would like to open it up to questions about the process. Basically, whatever you want to ask. If you want to ask more about concepts themselves, or if you're interested in the product I tried to launch, whatever you want, there's time. And that would be the end of it.
Nice. Excellent. Really, really, really good. Yeah, I mean, I had two questions. One you answered, which was on
Yep.
sort of quantifying. You know, I had the question of like, how much time would this have saved in our last project? But then you immediately came in with such strong points of, you know, took a year, team members leaving, like failure. So you knocked that out of the park very quickly. I think one question would be, you know, maybe not to answer today, but to think about tomorrow. You know, how would you run this in a team context?
Yeah.
Like, how would you see that happening, for example?
Yeah.
I mean, feel free to answer today.
So you mean like, okay. Oh, so like just basically to think about, you mean like the,
well, it's like, so
how it applies on the development level?
yeah, well, I think also, how do you operate as a product team here? And you know, this is something we didn't cover in enough detail just because it's a big topic, but it's how do you, so it's like,
Yeah,
great,
exactly.
Ashley's gone and done this on a
Oh, so
project.
talking
Like,
about like how to make use of Miro and stuff, or?
no, it's more so, you know, they're going to be going, or your boss is probably going, okay, great, Ashley's done this, like, you know, in this project, right, as a side thing, like, oh, I'm not sure it's going to work in a team context. And I think it's just, I think it is actually as simple as saying like, no, this is really simple. Like, we just put together an initial squad. So one way to talk about it is, yes, I don't want to call it two-track agile as a word for it, but ultimately two-track product initiatives, right? Where you're in sort of delivery mode with your current initiative, let's say, right? It's been mapped out what you're working on. And then you're going to be spending, let's say, 10 to 20% of your time with a smaller squad, like yourself, UX designer, maybe lead developer, just going through this process, right? With 10 to 20% of your time. And also what you're doing there is,
I get it. So
you're
like,
taking risk out.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, again, they're going to be going like, great, this sounds, you know, great, Ashley did this fun project, but like, I can't, you know, I'm doubtful it's going to work here. And I think it's just showing, no, it is that simple, but here's a way that we're going to mitigate any risks. You don't need to worry about it. We're going to do it in a two-track way. It's like, for our next initiative that starts in a month, for example, let's get a squad together. Or why don't we do just a 2-week sprint where, like, you know, 3 of us just focus on getting this process done. So I think, again, you know, people, I think really, really remembering, you know, even super smart, experienced people, they have existing habits, which are creating friction, and they are fearful of unknown, right? People just don't like change. Even people that worked in startup for a while, like, there's always resistance to it. So I think just always think like, how do you make this is just,
there is.
you know, no brainer. How do you make it a no brainer? What else? I mean, that was it. You know, I was writing, obviously I've got a lot of points I'll cover now, but I was trying to think of other questions. I think it's, I think the main thing is, sorry, those two. So I think you covered the first one, which is quantifying. Second one, running this in a team context. And I think the third one is just making sure that when you're presenting, you're picking up on any, not only when you're presenting, right? Picking up on any uncertainty, but over the coming, not just like week, but 6 months, you are hammering these terms home. You are making sure people hear them repeatedly, every key point that you're making. That's you know, it's a real challenge with leadership. Is I find it with like value proposition, talking to like mentors or, you know, partnerships you have to make the same point hundreds and hundreds of times, because people naturally sort of go out and like let's do all these other things. You have to sort of bring people back to what they should be doing. But no, honestly, excellent presentation. So what I'll do, I've got 3 types of feedback here. So I've got specifically just on the like broadly on the case study. Then I wrote comments on like, you know, I put myself in the position of like, okay, if you were pitching this to me as a team member, how effective did I think that was? And then just some general points from the program. I'll send these to you after if you'd like, so don't worry about taking notes. But
awesome. Okay.
cool. So I think on the case study itself, so problem, yeah, but great. I think actually we should start the case study with the problem generally. Great to explain. Great to, you know, you showed this isn't simple. I think that's such a key point. It's not just about like writing a problem and then like, oh, cool, done, right, move on to the next thing. You said like, oh, you know, I'm writing this and I wasn't quite sure. And we had these hypotheses. It's really a journey to test hypotheses. You're putting it in dev terms, right? When you're talking about hypotheses, right? You're sort of showing them, hey, I'm speaking your language. So I think really good that you explained the context there. And also like, why are we all here is, you know, I've talked about this and this is a process we should be following. Really important to do that. On the hypothesis 1, I think you did a very good job of explaining what is that product vision template? Right? Lots of people just list off like, so we just sort of did some interviews and then we came up with this thing, you know, this statement. No idea what that means. So you talked about the sort of quantification of interviews, good explanation, good visuals, quote, they were making the same point over and over again. So you're showing why this was valuable and what you learned from it. And also you're inviting the people you're pitching to like into that journey. So like, oh, you know what, it's a story, right? What happened next? Like, what were those points? And then great, afterwards you came in with that, here are the 4 insights, visually very good as well, that sort of slow fade on them. Small things, but super important. Other point on hypothesis 1, same point. Great summary of the learnings there. Again, really so important in the context of pitching this to a team. Right? They need to really buy into this journey.
Yeah.
On the blue ocean, very strong, not just because there was a big blue space, but just good thinking with the competitors. God, you know, there are times when there's just blue space and so it doesn't quite make sense. But good competitors.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
The 3 USPs were strong. I was thinking, you know, you missing anything around this? You know, I was thinking like in person, like bars, for example. Like, how does that work? And like, what are the pros and cons of that? You did cover this. You covered it later on in the Lean Canvas, though. So you covered those points. The offer within the offer, just on a personal note, I think it's so good to experience that kind of learning where you sort of see the nuance in something or see like, oh, wow, I've been looking at this in such a limited way. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a trap of being smart and having a track record of results is it's easy to just be biased by your own thinking. So I think being slightly hit in the face at times is just a good learning to have, because again, it makes you sort of see opportunities in a slightly more hesitant, analytical way, which is really powerful. And again, on that as well, like it's really good to revisit your assumptions and when like, actually, is this just about women or is it about men or is this, you know, about something else entirely? Really, really good to do that also at a slightly later stage. On the MVO, I think I would work on how to explain this because you mentioned it as like the MVO
this is what I struggled with. I struggled with this so hard. Like, how can I explain this to a bunch of devs that really like differentiates it from the way that they're already thinking?
It's not concrete, so it's difficult. Yeah. I think it's about the results and quantifying it in terms of time save, money save. So it's, yeah, you know, it's sort of, but ultimately what you're doing is focusing on values. It's like, we know that these people value these things, like these objectives, let's say. Yeah. And what we're doing is just focusing like, are these the right objectives people want to achieve with our product? Right. And then, so the reason why it's so important, so it's a focus on value and validating value. And that's so important because you can then explain, like, we're going to pivot most likely on the solution, right? The vehicle for delivering that value, but that value should always stay the same when we validate it. It's just like, we're always, you know, in our case, it's always focused on like, can we make everything really hands-on and actionable? And can we do the same with the mentorship, right? Can we make really high value support and mentorship, for example? So like, those are the 2 things we just try and every single cohort, every single interaction, it's like, can we get better at doing those 2 things? The vehicle could be really different. right? Like we're
Yeah.
experimenting with how to do mentorship. We're experimenting with workshops every single, every week even. But the value points are the same. So I think just making that quite clear. On the MVO results, yeah, really clear, just, you know, really nice to show that validation work, just that nice simple visual as well of the type form, I think it was, with the data in bold, so like the 25 survey responses, etc. And then final point, sort of on broadly on the case study, was bubble. Yeah, I think just, you know, great to actually see you take that step and I think put that out there and test it out. And I think in your, you know, in your case, I'll come to this when we talk about sort of general comments for you. I suppose, you know, the more I think about it, I suppose it doesn't matter so much in your case, like not having taken that next step with like building the prototypes. I think you seem to be in a good environment for delivery and like getting good at that. You know, execution's a really key skill. Yeah, and I think ultimately it's fine because really the focus, as I'm seeing it, is strategy, customer centricity on a strategic level. So not just like, hey, let's use a test this. And I think leadership, right? I think those are the sort of 3 areas. But we'll talk about that a bit later. Cool. So second batch was on, so pitching internally, like, you know, literally, how well did you convince me to run an effective process like this, or sort of buy into this? First point on the objective, problem statement and why so again, very clear, like clear problem statement, clear why everyone's here, like what are we, you know, we're learning about the process that's going to make us better. You could even go in with a stat there and like, this is going to save us X amount of time and money, right? To really catch their attention early on. Second point, blue ocean, very strong. Great that you touched upon the competitors not always being obvious. That's not a point that most people pick up on, and it's so important. And also very important to say, what, let's not even bother trying to, you know, go after, you know, Tinder's, as you said, pool of talent. Sorry, pool of dates, whatever you call it. Because that again is something that, like, most conversations are, oh, we need to just do, we need to have a foundation of this, and it's like, well, you know, even getting there is going to take you 5 years. So I think really good to make those points. So look, we're going to lose that battle, so let's fight another battle. Great to show the learnings you had with the offer within the offer. Again, you know, I talked about this before, but I think really good just to just show like how you have changed right through this journey and that process of learning. You know, time saved, not jumping into features, these kinds of things. People will then go like, oh yeah, you know, I would like to go on that journey as well. Again, it's not just about like people wanting to build good products. They want to do interesting work and buy into some sort of journey. On the problem understanding, so great where you sort of you did this a few times, right? Come in and say, hey, this took 2 weeks. It wasn't a month thing. Make it even clear, you know, this took me 2 weeks, a couple of hours a week after work. You know, you kept making that point, which I think was really strong. On the lean canvas, good, clear, compelling. I think also noted at that point, you know, within 10 minutes, you've already told this really compelling story and shown how all this exploration, you convert it into an action plan, right, with the lean canvas. So I think that's a really good point of crystallization to go like, right, Ashley knows her stuff, like we can trust her now to take the lead here. But then you talk through it really slowly, really clearly. It flowed very naturally as well, from point to point, from the problem to the unique value proposition to the unfair advantage. So very good. You know, easy just to skip over that because there's a lot of content. So I think very good to do that. MVO versus MVP, excellent that you covered this. Good. This is like one of my pet hates in product. And I think also, you know, you cannot underestimate like effective leadership is really about like saying few things but just repeating the same message. So keep making that point, because everyone's going to default to MVP thinking, like, trust me. They'll default to MVP.
It's already happening.
Just hammer home the same point. Hammer home the same. If it means like getting up the slide, like a couple of slides now and again, do it. Right, just repeat. On Bubble, great how you talk through this. Right, just hey, look, this was free, quick. You know, we added it to a real mailing list with real people. Like, there's real demand here. Like, imagine if we do this in the company. Right? So again, you're painting this,
Yeah.
that Wharton professor talks about this sort of idealized future where people can see like, wow, imagine the power of that. So really, really good there.
Yep.
On the next steps, very good. Absolutely love the point, as I said, about so I think you raised this later actually, but it's like, that product failed. We wasted a year. People quit. Right? That is time and money. Yeah, make that point even more, I would say. Like, right at the beginning, every time you talk about why we're doing the MBO, bang, same points.
Yep.
To the point that you get 5 to 10 times the point that people are laughing when you make the point, because guess what? It's going to absolutely brand that on their minds for the rest of the day. Good. The now versus should, I thought it was excellent. Very clear. I like the groupings in that. I think it was 3 groups, wasn't it? And then you have the sort of 4 bullet points.
Yeah,
now
exactly.
Versus should. Very strong, really clear, very memorable as well. One note I did on here was linked to what I just said earlier, was I did feel you missed the chance to quantify this again and sort of reiterate that wasted time, lost employees, failure point. So I think, small thing, but again, it's, I think in your case, it's like going from like very
reiterating,
good to exactly. That's the key from going like good leadership to world-class leadership. And I really liked at the end, you sort of laid out a challenge. So it's like, we are a team that can move and learn quickly, like we've done it before. Like, let's embrace this new process, which is basically a call to action, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like a landing page, right? You've sort of gone through that process.
Yeah.
And then I think final point was just, I mean, it's all the same stuff. It's also like storytelling, what we consider marketing, but it's storytelling.
Yeah.
And then final point generally, just I think kept things very simple. Like, you didn't use buzzwords. You didn't feel the need to sound, clever and throw in complicated words, which is.
I hate when devs do this, so I never do.
Good, yeah. No, I mean, people do.
I break everything down and I repeat it.
Yeah, it's an insecurity thing. It's an insecurity thing when people do it.
Yeah, I think so.
Good,
I think
good.
so too.
Particularly because you're also introducing like 3 or 4 new concepts. So just keep it really simple. I think really, really good.
Yeah.
And then I think just, general comments from the 8 weeks I was writing out this morning. I mean, firstly, presentation, I think excellent, really, really strong. Again, also serving the objective or the outcome you're looking for, which is like getting buy-in. I think the big challenge is now putting that into action and keeping people reading from the same hymn sheet. It's always the challenge in product.
Yeah.
And general comments.
Yeah, definitely.
I would have liked you to take the concept further, like into the sort of PMF engine, like validating a no-code prototype. I think particularly not having dev experience, and you can do this in your free time after, if you have access to content. Just putting a bubble prototype together is just a good way to. It's a crash course in programming, really, because you see like, how do things link together? Right? How do you structure a basic database? These kinds of things, and like UI.
Yeah.
So, it's a good way to learn, but again, it's not essential, I think, with your trajectory. I think also moving quite senior quite quickly, but I think something to, just do in your spare time. It's quite fun. And again, it's not just the technical skills. I think also just seeing what it's like testing a prototype and going through the PMF engine, see how easy it is to actually define like what next steps would be. Takes a huge amount of stress and time off, the big challenge of prioritization, endless discussions about like, what do we work on next? I think you just sort of see through experiencing like, oh, okay, here's how I would use that.
Yeah, it's clear. Yeah, I get that.
I mean, what I challenge you to do on that is just go through week 5 and 6 when you actually build something in your team.
Mm-hmm.
So like when you've done the MBO stuff, like, hey, obviously get maybe lead dev to work on the main one, but why don't you have a crack at it as well and just see what you come up with. I think second point, I think the other area to focus on would be continuing to develop your strategic thinking. So again, linked to that solution, I think, so Daniel was a very good example of this, where because he'd done his first prototype with Airtable and Bubble, we were having lots of discussions in this second and third one-on-one around like, what would the strategic steps be as a business? So it's like, okay, long term, it's building an integrated like analytics tracking tool for advertisers. How would we get there? We can't do that immediately. So what are the steps? So let's build some sort of review platforms. We build trust and we're gathering data from these advertisers. What would the second step be? Maybe even like in-person consulting. Third
Mm-hmm.
step, building towards this like long-term bet on analytics integration. I think that's that's a skill that's not so important now, but I think the better, the more advanced, let's say, the more technical the products you start working on, you want to be seeing like, how do we sort of get there without immediately putting a huge bet on, 1 year bet on something. So I think that's something to think about, to sort of keep thinking about, I suppose, in the background. MBO helps you there as well. But I think generally the small things, I think generally you've come like, I think as we said at the beginning, right, it's really about putting fuel on the fire. I think you're already on the right trajectory. Like you have the right mindset, good product mindset. You've got very natural leadership qualities. And I think what the program, these frameworks will help you do is simply like give a bit more of this, some of these like foundation frameworks to communicate better with people, right? To get people on board with the direction you want to go in. And I think, final point, as I said, I think the challenge now is you're going to have to just hammer home all of these points, like MBO versus MVP.
Yeah.
Value, like doing things in a really lean way, like staying focused on the value, like 6 months down the line, a year down the line, for example.
Yeah.
And I think if you keep repeating the points, that you're going to get these,
continuing with it.
Exactly. This you'll get this process integrated. No, but honestly, I think real pleasure having you on the program, and great to see this, because it really it's brought together, and for me it gives me confidence now that you'll go off and put this into practice.
Yeah, of course. The last part was a struggle, but I definitely came away with a lot that I've already been able to put into action and have already got really great feedback on. So nice. I definitely think that this helped me a lot, and the people I've been able to talk to as well also contribute to this. Also helping me get through the program, even like just to cut my losses, figure out what I took from this, and really put it together. So I think like as a whole, it was 100% worth it. So
nice. Well, keep me in the loop about how that presentation goes. I'll be interested to hear what the results are.
Absolutely, I'll let you know.
Nice. Any questions over the next? Well. Yeah, fingers crossed. No, you'll be absolutely fine. You'll be fine. I say that not generally having thought through this as you were pitching.
Yeah.
Nice.
I appreciate
Good luck with
it.
Then. And then we'll see you on the.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Henry.
Thanks, Ashley.